Uju was the most beautiful in the kingdom of Oro. Her smooth, dark skin and captivating eyes were enough to charm anyone who looked at her. Uju's presence was magnetic. She was the desire of every man and the envy of every woman in the village. Men, both young bachelors and married husbands, were captivated by Uju. They competed fiercely for her attention, bringing her gifts and showering her with compliments. It wasn't just the allure of her beauty. There was something mysterious and irresistible about her that no man could ignore. This obsession with Uju caused a rift in the village, as women grew increasingly jealous and suspicious of her intentions. The village women whispered amongst themselves, casting envious glances at Uju. They couldn't understand why their menfolk were so taken with her. The more they talked, the more the rumors spread. They talked about her secret powers and wondered if she was a witch who had enchanted their men. The men's desire for Uju grew more. They were willing to sacrifice everything to be close to her, even if they had to give all they had. Bachelors spent their savings and sold their belongings, while married men neglected their families and responsibilities. The more they gave, the more they wanted from her, unable to resist her beauty. The women of the village were angry. Their homes were falling apart, and their families were suffering. Husbands and sons, once dependable and loving, became shadows of their former selves, consumed by their obsession with Uju. The women's jealousy turned to desperation as they watched their lives unravel. Desperate to break Uju's hold over the men, the women began spreading malicious rumors. They claimed that Uju was not merely a beautiful girl but possessed a dark secret. They whispered that she had bewitched the men, casting a spell that made them forsake their families. Yet, despite these efforts, the men continued to flock to Uju, captivated by something they couldn't understand. Uju herself seemed unaffected by the gossip, but her calm demeanor only fueled the village's gossip and anger. Uju made it her goal to destroy the homes of the women who gossiped about her. She started with Mrs. Chima's husband. Chief Chima, a prominent and wealthy figure in Oro Kingdom, was known for his wisdom and leadership. Despite his high status and the respect he commanded, he too fell under Uju's spell. Chima was captivated by her beauty, finding himself unable to resist her charm. His visits to her became frequent, and he showered her with lavish gifts, neglecting his duties and his family. Chima's wife, noticing the change in her husband, grew suspicious. She confronted him, but he dismissed her concerns, insisting that she was imagining things. However, Chima could not hide his love for Uju. He spent more time with Uju and his obsession grew. He began to spend recklessly, buying Uju expensive gifts and neglecting his responsibilities at home. Soon the chief Chima slept with Uju and he became pregnant. The chief's tummy began to grow bigger and his wife started noticing some changes. He had weird cravings, morning sickness and other pregnancy symptoms. The chief treated different kinds of diseases. He did not know he was pregnant. The situation got worse when Chima's wife discovered that her husband was showing some symptoms of pregnancy. At first she couldn't believe it. The idea was so absurd that she thought it must be a mistake. She confronted him, and he denied he was pregnant. Because his wife was asking too many questions, he sent her packing so he could hide his secret. Chima, unable to face the shame, withdrew from public life. He hid in his home, refusing to see anyone. His wife, furious and humiliated, began to spread the news of his pregnancy. The villagers were in disbelief. A man being pregnant was beyond their understanding. Some dismissed the story as nonsense, while others believed that Uju had bewitched Chima in some way. As the news spread, the village became divided between those who believed in the strange occurrences and those who thought it was all a scandalous rumor. Even with all the news about Uju impregnating, the chief men still flocked to her place. They did not stop loving her or bringing gifts for her. Mothers spoke to their sons to avoid Uju so their fate won't be like Chief Chima, yet they refused. One young man named Obi was next on Uju's list. Obi's mother was part of the women who started spilling rumors about her, and she vowed her son will suffer for it. Obi was handsome and ambitious. He was well-liked and respected in the village. But like many others, he became entranced by Uju. Obi left Dana, the woman he was supposed to get married to, and started chasing Uju. His wife-to-be and his family noticed the change in him as he began to spend more time around Uju, neglecting Dana and his work. They begged him to leave Uju, but he was always eager to please her, going out of his way to gain her favor. As Obi's love grew, he spent more and more money on Uju. He bought her gifts, paid her compliments, and spent all his free time with her. His obsession soon took over his life, and he found himself in financial trouble, having spent all his savings on Uju. Uju then lured Obi to bed and slept with him. After a few months he became pregnant. The situation reached a shocking climax when Obi began to show signs of pregnancy. At first, the villagers were skeptical, thinking it was another wild rumor. But as Obi's tummy began to grow bigger each month, the village was thrown into confusion and fear. If Chima's pregnancy had been unbelievable, Obi's case was even more so, as he was young and seemingly healthy. The villagers began to suspect that Uju was behind these strange occurrences. The evidence was circumstantial, but they couldn't ignore the pattern. Obi and Chima were both close to Uju, and both had become pregnant. The men of the village started to fear Uju, while the women's jealousy turned into anger. They saw Uju as a threat, not just to their relationships but to the natural order of the village. Next on the line was Elder Namdi, was a respected figure in the community, known for his wisdom and guidance. Despite his age, he too found himself drawn to Uju. It was unexpected. A man of his standing and experience should have been immune to such infatuations. Yet, Namdi was captivated by Uju's charm, just like the others. His behavior changed. He became more distant from his family, spending more time in Uju's company. Namdi's fascination with Uju became a topic of concern among the villagers. They couldn't understand why a respected elder would stoop so low. The women, particularly, were disturbed by his actions. They worried about the influence Uju had on the village's men and what it meant for their families. Namdi's family was especially concerned, but he dismissed their worries, insisting that they were overreacting. The situation escalated when Namdi, like Chima and Obi before him, began to show signs of pregnancy. The news of Namdi's condition shocked the village. If the pregnancies of younger men had been surprising, the sight of a pregnant elder was almost too much to bear. The villagers were terrified and confused. They couldn't understand how such a thing was possible, and their fear of Uju grew. Namdi's pregnancy became the talk of the village. People speculated about how it was happening and what it meant for the community. Some believed that Uju had cursed the men or that she had some supernatural power. Others thought it was a punishment for the men's infidelity and obsession. The women, particularly, were outraged. They saw Uju as a threat to their families and the village's future. The village elders, seeing the situation, called for a council meeting. They needed to address the crisis and find a solution. The community was on the brink of chaos, with fear and confusion spreading rapidly. The elders knew that they had to act quickly to prevent further turmoil. At the council meeting, the elders discussed the situation and debated what to do. Some advocated for a direct confrontation with Uju. Some elders were in support of Uju and asked the elders to let her be. Many elders were scared of Uju's powers. They did whatever they could do to stay far from here. The villagers, meanwhile, were divided. Some supported the elders' decision, while others were skeptical. The crisis reached a peak when more men in the village started to show signs of pregnancy. The phenomenon was no longer isolated to just a few individuals. It was spreading. The village was in an uproar, with fear and uncertainty gripping the community. The women were particularly alarmed, as their husbands and sons were affected. They demanded answers and action from the village leaders. Some men were afraid to leave their homes, and rumors spread like wildfire. Some believed that Uju was a witch or a spirit sent to punish them. Others thought it was a curse that needed to be lifted. The village was divided, with no clear path forward. Mothers and wives begged their men to stay away from Uju, but their pleas fell on deaf ears. The men were drawn to her, unable to resist her charm. It was as if Uju had cast a spell over them, and nothing could break it. The women were desperate, but they didn't know what to do. They feared for their families and their future. The men, despite the growing number of pregnancies, continued to be drawn to Uju. The women were frustrated and angry, feeling helpless and betrayed. The village was a powder keg, and it seemed only a matter of time before something exploded. While all this was happening, Uju remained calm and untroubled. She did not seem to be affected by the turmoil she had caused. This only fueled the villagers' anger and fear. They saw her as the cause of their problems and demanded that the council do something about her. The situation was serious, and the village was on the brink of collapse. Do you want to find out how Uju got the men pregnant? Then comment for part 2. Please subscribe, like, comment, share to your loved ones.